The abandoned prison. There are certain places in this world that feel wrong long before you understand why. Places that seem to breathe when nobody is looking. Places that wait. I first saw a Black Ridge prison in late autumn during the final weeks of a relationship that had already died quietly beneath the surface. My boyfriend at the time lived nearly an hour outside the city, somewhere beyond the endless countryside, where the roads became narrow veins cutting through forests and frozen fields. Every Friday evening I drove the same route beneath gray skies while rain whispered softly against my windshield. And every single time I saw it. The prison. At first, it appeared only briefly between the trees, like something half-remembered from a nightmare. A massive Gothic structure standing alone in the middle of nowhere. Its black roof rose sharply into the fog like the spine of some sleeping beast. Tiny windows lined the walls in endless rows, dark and hollow like dead eyes. At the highest point stood a giant iron cross that leaned slightly to one side, as though time itself had grown tired of carrying it. Even from miles away, the place disturbed me. Not in the dramatic way horror movies try to scare you. It was quieter than that, more intimate. The prison felt abandoned in the same way a graveyard feels abandoned, empty, but not truly alone. One evening while we drove past it together, I finally asked my boyfriend what the building was. He barely glanced toward it. Some old prison, I think he muttered. It's been empty forever. That was all. No curiosity, no interest. I remember staring through the passenger window at the silhouette disappearing into the mist, and feeling strangely disappointed by his answer. Because from the moment I first saw Black Ridge Prison, something inside me wanted to know it. Not visit it. Not explore it. Know it. As though the building itself carried a memory just beneath the surface. Weeks later, after the relationship ended, I still thought about the prison constantly. Some nights I would dream about it. Not nightmares exactly. Just strange dreams where endless hallways stretched beneath flickering lights while distant voices echoed somewhere underground. I never saw faces in those dreams. Only doors. Rust-covered doors disappearing into darkness. I finally told my best friend Laura about the place over coffee one rainy afternoon. Laura laughed immediately. "That sounds terrifying," she said excitedly, which was exactly the sort of response I should have expected from her. Laura loved abandoned places. Old hospitals. Collapsed churches. Forgotten train tunnels. She treated danger the way children treat amusement parks. To her, fear was entertainment. To me, fear felt personal. But somehow whenever Laura smiled at me with that reckless confidence, I found myself agreeing to things I would normally avoid. "You know what we should do?" she asked. I already knew I would regret whatever came next. "We should go there." I laughed nervously. "At night?" "Obviously at night. That's a terrible idea. That's why it's fun." I should have said no. God, I should have said no. But curiosity is a dangerous thing when mixed with loneliness. And after my breakup, loneliness had become the loudest thing inside me. 3 nights later, we drove out toward Black Ridge Prison at nearly 1 in the morning. The countryside looked different at night. Colder. Infinite. The road stretched endlessly through fields covered in silver fog while dead trees twisted against the sky like skeletal hands. Laura played quiet music through the speakers, while tapping nervously against the steering wheel. Even she seemed slightly unsettled. "Still want to do this?" she asked. "No," I admitted, honestly. She grinned. Perfect. When the prison finally appeared through the fog ahead of us, my chest tightened instinctively. It looked larger at night. Much larger. The building rose from the earth like a cathedral built for something unholy. Moonlight barely touched its walls through the heavy mist drifting across the fields. Laura parked the car far from the main entrance beside an old wire fence. "If somebody's watching the place, I don't want our car directly outside," she explained. That sentence did not help my anxiety. The walk toward the prison felt endless. Our boots crushed wet grass beneath us, while freezing wind swept across the fields, carrying the smell of rain and soil. The closer we got, the quieter the world became. No insects, no birds, nothing. Only the distant creaking sound of rusted metal somewhere in the darkness. When we finally reached the front gates, I stopped completely. Up close, Black Ridge Prison looked ancient. Not merely abandoned. Ancient. The stone walls were stained black with moisture and age. Iron bars covered every window, and deep cracks ran through parts of the structure like old scars. Laura shined her flashlight upward. "Jesus," she whispered softly. For the first time since I had known her, she sounded uncertain. The massive front doors stood slightly open. Not broken open. Not forced. Open. As though someone had left recently. "We should leave," I said immediately. Laura looked toward me. "Amelia, no, seriously, this feels wrong. That's exactly why we came." Before I could argue further, she pushed the door gently. The hinges groaned loudly through the night. A wave of cold air rolled out from inside, carrying the smell of mold, dust, and wet wood. The darkness beyond the doorway looked impossibly deep. Laura stepped inside first. I followed because being alone, outside, somehow felt worse. The interior of the prison swallowed sound strangely. Our footsteps echoed through enormous hallways lined with peeling walls and rust-covered pipes. Dust floated endlessly through our flashlight beams like pale snow drifting underwater. Everywhere we looked, pieces of the prison remained frozen in time. Old desks, broken chairs, stacks of yellowed paperwork scattered across the floor. At one point, Laura found a row of inmate photographs half-rotted beneath fallen plaster. The faces stared upward blankly. Forgotten men trapped forever inside forgotten paper. "This place is incredible," Laura whispered. I couldn't answer. Something about the prison made it difficult to breathe normally. Not because of the dust, because the building felt aware. That sounds insane now, but it's true. Blackridge did not feel empty. It felt asleep. We continued deeper until we reached a massive cell block. Rows of iron cells stretched upward across 3 floors beneath hanging walkways and rusted railings. Our flashlight beams disappeared into the darkness above. The silence there felt unbearable. I remember hearing water dripping somewhere far away. Slow, rhythmic, like a clock counting down. Then came the sound. A loud metallic crash echoed from somewhere deeper inside the prison. Both Laura and I jumped violently. "What the hell was that?" I whispered. Laura tried laughing, but even she sounded frightened now. Probably part of the ceiling collapsing. But before either of us moved, another sound followed. Footsteps. Not ours. Slow footsteps echoing through the darkness ahead. My blood turned instantly cold. A figure appeared at the far end of the cell block. Tall. Still. Watching us. For several horrible seconds, nobody moved. Then the man slowly raised one hand. "Easy," he called calmly. "I don't want to scare you girls." His voice echoed softly through the prison. European. Smooth. Almost elegant. He stepped slightly closer into our flashlight beams. The man looked perhaps mid-40s. Dark hair touched with gray. Pale skin. Sharp cheekbones. He wore jeans beneath a black coat and carried an old flashlight loosely at his side. But something about him felt deeply unnatural. Not visibly dangerous. Worse than dangerous. Controlled. Like a man carefully pretending to be harmless. "My name is Michael," he said politely. "I handle security here." Laura immediately stepped in front of me slightly. "Security?" she asked cautiously. Michael smiled faintly. "People break in often," he explained. "Management prefers somebody keep an eye on the place." The explanation sounded rehearsed. Too smooth. Too ready. I looked around instinctively. "If this place has security," I asked quietly, "why was the front door open?" For the first time, Michael paused. Only for a second. Then he smiled again. "Old building," he replied softly. "Nothing stays closed here for very long." Something about that answer made my stomach tighten. Laura glanced toward me briefly. I could tell she felt it too. Michael slowly approached us through the darkness. His footsteps barely made sound against the concrete floor. "You girls really shouldn't be here tonight," he said gently. At that exact moment, my flashlight flickered violently in my hand. The beam dimmed, brightened, dimmed again, and behind Michael, deep within the darkness, between the prison cells, something moved. The man without a shadow. For a moment, none of us moved. The prison seemed to hold its breath around us. My flashlight trembled violently in my hand, while the beam flickered across the endless rows of rusted prison cells behind Michael. Every instinct inside me screamed to run, yet my body remained frozen beneath the enormous darkness of Blackridge Prison. "What was that?" Laura asked sharply. Michael turned his head slightly toward the shadows behind him. The movement was strangely slow, deliberate. When he looked back at us, he smiled again. "Old buildings make noises," he said softly. "Especially this one." His voice remained calm, but something underneath it had changed. Something colder. Laura stepped closer beside me. "We're leaving," she said firmly. Michael nodded politely. Of course. Yet he didn't move out of the way. Instead, he stood there quietly, watching us beneath the pale flashlight beams while distant water dripped somewhere deep inside the prison. I realized then how unnaturally still he was. Most people shift their weight, blink, breathe visibly. Michael barely moved at all. "Front entrance isn't safe anymore," he continued gently. "Part of the ceiling collapsed near the east corridor about 20 minutes ago." I stared at him. "How do you know that?" Again that tiny pause. "Because I heard it." The answer sounded reasonable. Too reasonable. Laura clearly felt it too. "Because I saw her jaw tighten slightly." "We came through the front already," she replied. "We didn't see anything collapsed." Michael smiled faintly. "Things change quickly here." The sentence settled heavily into the silence. Things change quickly here. The way he said it made the prison itself sound alive. Behind us, somewhere far above the cell block metal groaned loudly. I nearly jumped. Laura cursed under her breath. Michael watched both of us carefully. "You girls are frightened," he observed softly. "No kidding," Laura snapped. For the first time, Michael laughed quietly. The sound echoed strangely through the prison. Not warm laughter. Lonely laughter. "I understand," he said. "Blackridge has that effect on people." He slowly raised his flashlight toward a dark hallway branching deeper into the prison. "If you follow me," he continued, "I can take you through a safer exit." Laura immediately shook her head. "We're fine finding our own way." Michael tilted his head slightly. "You won't." That answer came too quickly, too confidently. The silence afterward felt unbearable. I glanced toward the massive corridor behind us, trying to remember the path we had taken inside, but suddenly everything looked unfamiliar. The hallways seemed different now. Longer, darker, as though the prison had shifted around us while we weren't paying attention. Laura grabbed my wrist gently. "We should just go," she whispered. I nodded immediately. But before we could move, Michael spoke again. "You really don't want to wander here alone tonight." There was something deeply unsettling about the way he emphasized tonight. Not dramatic, not threatening, almost sympathetic, as though he pitied us already. Laura ignored him and started walking back toward the corridor we originally came through. I followed closely beside her. For several seconds, the only sound was our footsteps echoing against the concrete floor. Then Michael spoke behind us. "You're heading the wrong direction." Neither of us answered. "Seriously," he called calmly. "That hallway loops back into the lower wing." Laura kept walking faster. The prison suddenly felt enormous around us. Our flashlight beams slid across endless walls covered in peeling paint and water stains dark as dried blood. Old pipes ran across the ceiling overhead, while distant metallic sounds echoed unpredictably through the structure. After nearly 2 minutes of walking, Laura slowed. My stomach dropped instantly. We had returned to the same cell block, the exact same one. Michael still stood there waiting, smiling softly beneath the darkness. Neither Laura nor I spoke. I could hear my own heartbeat now. "That's impossible," Laura whispered. Michael spread his hands slightly. "I told you." For the first time since entering Blackridge Prison, genuine fear entered Laura's eyes. Not excitement, not adrenaline. Fear. Michael approached slowly. "I know this place well," he said gently. "You don't." Something moved again behind the prison cells above us. Fast. Like a figure disappearing between shadows. I turned instinctively toward it. "Did you see that?" I whispered. Laura nodded immediately. Michael remained perfectly calm. "Probably an animal," he replied. But there was no conviction in his voice now. Only observation, as though he knew exactly what had moved, and knew better than to explain it. Eventually, Laura exhaled shakily. "Fine," she muttered. "Show us the exit." Michael gave a slow nod. "This way." He turned and began walking deeper into the prison. Laura leaned close to me immediately. "I don't trust him. I know. If he tries anything, I know." But despite the fear crushing my chest following him, still felt safer than remaining alone inside Blackridge. That realization terrified me, most of all. The deeper we went, the colder the prison became. The corridors narrowed gradually until the walls almost seemed to press inward around us. Rust-covered doors lined both sides of the hall, while ancient electrical wires hung loose from the ceilings like dead vines. Michael walked several feet ahead, carrying his flashlight low. Yet, something about him continued bothering me. At first I couldn't understand what it was. Then, suddenly I realized. I could barely hear his footsteps. Laura noticed it too. Her expression tightened immediately. "Hey," she called carefully. "How long have you worked here?" Michael didn't look back. "A long time." That's not an answer. He smiled faintly over his shoulder. "Long enough." Laura rolled her eyes slightly at me, but I could tell her confidence was fading. Mine already had. As we continued downward through the prison, the architecture became older. Much older. The walls changed from concrete to dark stone, slick with moisture. Iron rings protruded from certain sections of the corridor walls, as though prisoners had once been chained there long ago. The air smelled wrong down there. Wet earth. Mold. And underneath both, something rotten. I tried ignoring it until we passed a heavy steel door hanging slightly open. Inside sat an old wooden chair surrounded by leather restraints. I froze immediately. Laura stopped too. "What the hell is this place?" she whispered. Michael finally turned fully toward us. His face looked pale beneath the flashlight glow. This wing was abandoned. First, he explained quietly. "Why?" He stared at us for several seconds before answering. "Bad things happened here." The way he said it made my skin crawl. Then he continued walking. At some point, Laura suddenly grabbed my arm tightly. "Amelia," she whispered. "What?" She pointed toward the floor. I looked down. My stomach twisted violently. There were no shadows beneath Michael. Our flashlight beam stretched our shadows long against the stone walls, but beneath him, nothing. For one horrible second, my brain refused to understand what I was seeing. Laura looked terrified now. "Do you see it?" she breathed. I nodded slowly. Every instinct inside me screamed that we needed to run immediately, but the corridor around us had become impossibly narrow. Too narrow. Michael stopped walking. Without turning around, he spoke softly. "You girls are whispering." Laura stepped backward instinctively. "We're leaving." Michael finally turned toward us again, and for the first time, his smile disappeared completely. The warmth vanished from his face, like light dying inside a window. "You can't leave that way anymore," he said quietly. The softness in his voice remained, but now it sounded empty, inhuman. Behind him stood a narrow staircase descending into absolute darkness beneath the prison. No light reached the bottom, only blackness. Michael gestured gently toward it. "This is the safest route." Laura shook her head immediately. "No." Michael watched her silently. Then very calmly he said, "After you." Nobody moved. The silence became unbearable. Far below us, deep underneath Blackridge Prison, something metallic scraped slowly against concrete. Then came a sound I will never forget for the rest of my life. A human scream. Distant, weak, as though someone far underground had just realized nobody was ever coming to save them. The basement below hell. The scream lasted only a few seconds, but those few seconds changed something inside me forever. It echoed upward through the staircase beneath Blackridge Prison, like the sound of someone being pulled slowly into death itself. Then came silence again. Not normal silence, the kind that feels alive. Laura grabbed my arm so tightly it hurt. "We're leaving right now," she whispered. Michael remained perfectly still at the top of the staircase. No emotion crossed his face. No reaction at all. As though the scream beneath us had been expected. As though it belonged there. "You heard that?" Laura demanded shakily. Michael looked toward the darkness below. Yes, that was a person. His pale eyes slowly returned to us. Not anymore. The sentence hit me like ice water. Laura stepped backward, immediately dragging me with her. Michael moved at the same moment. Not aggressively. Not quickly. That somehow made it worse. He simply stepped sideways, blocking the narrow corridor behind us. "You shouldn't panic," he said softly. "People panic when they realize the truth." "What truth?" Laura snapped. For the first time, Michael smiled again. But now the smile looked wrong. Empty. Like someone remembering how human beings are supposed to behave. That Blackridge doesn't let people leave easily. Something metallic slammed somewhere deep below us. Then, another scream rose from the darkness beneath the staircase. Closer this time. I felt my entire body go cold. Laura reacted first. She pulled the pepper spray from her pocket and aimed it directly at Michael. "Move." Michael glanced calmly at the canister. "I wouldn't do that." "Move." For several horrible seconds, nobody moved. Then Michael took one slow step toward us. Laura sprayed immediately. He recoiled sharply as the spray struck his eyes and face. A terrible sound escaped him then. Not a scream. Not human. More like an animal choking underwater. "Run," Laura shouted. We ran blindly through the corridor. Behind us, Michael slammed violently against the stone wall while coughing and growling in the darkness. The prison exploded into noise around us. Metal doors rattled violently somewhere nearby. Deep booming sounds echoed through the floors beneath our feet. And underneath it all, I heard whispering. Dozens of whispers. Soft voices moving through the walls of Black Ridge Prison. Laura and I sprinted through endless corridors while our flashlight beams shook wildly across peeling walls and rust-covered bars. Every hallway looked identical. Every turn led into more darkness. "This way!" Laura shouted. We burst into another cell block larger than the first one. 3 stories of prison cells towered above us beneath hanging walkways swallowed by darkness. Then the lights came on, one by one. Not fully. Weak yellow bulbs flickered alive across the upper levels with loud electrical buzzing. I froze instantly. The cells were occupied. Not physically, but silhouettes stood behind the bars. Human shapes motionless in the darkness, watching us. My throat tightened violently. "Laura," I whispered. She looked upward. The moment she saw them, all color drained from her face. There had to be dozens, maybe more, figures standing silently behind rusted cell doors throughout the prison block. None moved. None spoke. But every single one faced us. Then suddenly, bang! One of the cell doors slammed shut upstairs. Then another. Then another. The sound exploded through the prison like gunfire. Laura grabbed my hand again. "Don't look at them," she whispered desperately. But I already had, and I swear to God, one of them was smiling. We ran again. At some point, we passed through an old administrative office half buried beneath collapsed plaster and water damage. Laura slammed the door behind us while both of us struggled to breathe. "We need another exit," she gasped. My legs were trembling uncontrollably. "Who the hell is he?" Laura shook her head. "I don't know." Then she stopped suddenly. Her flashlight had landed on a wall covered in old newspaper clippings. Missing persons. Dozens of them. Young men. Young women. Tourists. Urban explorers. Students. The dates stretched back decades. Some photographs were nearly faded away entirely. And in the center of the wall was Michael. A black and white photograph from an old newspaper article. The headline above it read, "Local man suspected in multiple disappearances, 1987. I stepped closer, slowly. Michael looked younger in the photo, but unmistakably the same. Same eyes. Same calm smile. Laura grabbed another article nearby. Her breathing stopped completely. "No," she whispered. "What?" Her flashlight shook violently across the article. The paper was dated 23 years earlier. The headline read, "Body of suspect recovered beneath Black Ridge Prison." I stared at the page in disbelief. No. Laura looked physically ill. "He's dead." The room suddenly felt freezing cold. Behind us, somewhere beyond the office walls, footsteps echoed slowly through the prison again. Not rushed. Patient. Coming closer. I backed away from the wall. "That's impossible." Laura turned toward me with tears beginning to form in her eyes. "We need to get out now." Then, the office lights died. Darkness swallowed the room instantly. Something moved outside the door. Slow scratching. Then, Michael's voice came softly through the wood. "You shouldn't have come here." Laura grabbed my wrist. There. A narrow hallway extended behind a row of broken filing cabinets. We ran into it immediately. The passage descended downward, much deeper underground. The air became damp and suffocating. The walls changed again, from stone to ancient concrete stained black with moisture. Then we found the basement. I cannot fully describe that place. Even now, years later, my mind refuses to remember certain parts clearly. The basement beneath Black Ridge Prison looked less like a prison and more like something medieval. Rust-covered chains hung from walls. Old medical tables sat overturned beside leather restraints. Water dripped endlessly from pipes overhead into black puddles across the floor, and everywhere there were scratches. Thousands of scratches covering the walls. Names, dates, prayers, some written in blood, others carved so deeply into the concrete that fingers must have broken creating them. Laura suddenly stopped walking. Her flashlight beam rested on one wall. I followed it slowly. My blood turned to ice. One name had been carved much deeper than the others. Amelia Fresh. Not old, fresh. I staggered backward in horror. No. Laura looked close to panic now. We need to go. But before we could move, Michael appeared at the far end of the basement corridor. He stood motionless beneath the flickering lights. Except now he no longer looked entirely human. The left side of his face seemed wrong somehow. Blurred, distorted. Like a damaged photograph, struggling to remain solid. "You were curious," he said softly. His voice echoed unnaturally through the basement. Curious people always come down here eventually. Laura screamed at him to stay away. Michael ignored her completely. His eyes remained fixed on me. "You felt it before you entered," he continued quietly. "Blackridge calls lonely people." The lights flickered violently overhead, and suddenly the silhouettes appeared again, behind the basement bars. Dozens of them, watching silently. I realized then what they were. Not prisoners. Victims. People who never escaped. Laura grabbed my arm hard enough to hurt. "Run when I tell you." What tears streamed down her face now. Run. Before I could react, Laura shoved a heavy metal cart directly toward Michael. The crashing sound echoed explosively through the basement. Michael stumbled backward for the first time. Laura turned toward me. Her expression looked terrified but determined. "Go, Laura, go," I ran. God forgive me, I ran. Behind me, chaos erupted through the basement. Metal crashing. Laura screaming. Michael shouting something I couldn't understand. Then one final sound. Laura's scream. Sharp. Horrifying. Abruptly cut off. And then, silence. I reached the upper levels of Blackridge, somehow half blind with panic. I don't remember finding the exit. I only remember cold rain striking my face as I stumbled into the night screaming Laura's name across the empty fields. The police searched Blackridge Prison the following morning. They found no Michael, no underground basement, and no Laura. Officially, she vanished without explanation. Most people believed we panicked inside the prison and became separated somehow. Some thought Laura simply ran away afterward. Nobody believed my story. Not entirely. Months later, I received a package with no return address. Inside was a single photograph. Laura sat in darkness, staring directly at the camera. Her face looked pale, empty. Behind her stood the faint outline of prison bars. Written carefully, on the back were 5 words. "She stayed with me." I still keep that photograph locked away, and sometimes late at night when rain hits my windows softly enough, I swear, I can still hear Blackridge breathing beneath the earth.